Hello, everyone. So by now you should have finished reading Romeo and Juliet. So this is my breakdown video over Act 5 as a review for your quiz over Act 5, which will open tomorrow. So Act 5, short act, simple act, only 3 scenes. The first scene starts with Romeo in Mantua, where Romeo is reflecting on a dream that he's had. He had a dream that Juliet found him dead and kissed him, which brought him back to life. And he is interpreting this dream to mean that good news is coming. And immediately after this reflection, his servant Balthazar arrives from Verona with news. Balthazar the implication I have with Balthazar, even though this is the first time he's introduced, Romeo in Act 2, Romeo refers to a servant of his that he trusts, that could be trusted to deliver a rope ladder to the nurse for her to give to Juliet. And the implication I have is that Balthazar is that servant that Romeo trusts. And while he apparently doesn't know that Romeo and Juliet are married, he seems to know that they at least have or had a relationship. Anyway, so Balthazar arrives to tell Romeo that Juliet's dead. Now, it's important to note that Balthazar is not the messenger who was sent by Friar Lawrence. If you remember from Act 4, with Friar Lawrence's plan, his very convoluted plan to try and figure out a way to work around the situation of Juliet being forced to marry Paris, Friar Lawrence had Juliet take a sleeping potion that would make it seem as though she was dead for 42 hours, which would give it enough time for her parents to find her, think that she's dead, have her funeral, and put her body in the Capulet tomb. While Friar Lawrence, meanwhile, would send a letter to Romeo in Mantua telling him that Juliet was faking her death and that he needs to come back to Verona to let her out of the tomb so that way they can go back to Mantua together. Balthazar is not that messenger. Balthazar just seems to have gone of his own accord to tell Romeo that Juliet is dead. And again, Balthazar does not know that she's not really dead. So this is a major, probably the biggest piece of dramatic irony in the entire play that's developed here, where we, the audience, know that Juliet is not really dead, but Romeo does not and thinks that she's actually dead. So after hearing this news, Romeo is distraught and decides that life is not worth living without Juliet. And he resolves to return to Verona to kill himself with Juliet. So to that end, he sends Balthazar to arrange some horses so they can go back to Verona. He does not tell Balthazar that he's planning on killing himself, but he has Balthazar arrange some horses to go back to Verona, while he sets out to go to a nearby apothecary to buy poison. And he specifically mentions a number of times that this apothecary that he's looking for is really, really poor. And an apothecary is someone, it's kind of like a pharmacist or like a medicine man. You can buy medicines and stuff from him. But he's looking for this really poor apothecary because selling poison was illegal in Mantua, punishable by death. But Romeo is betting that since this guy is really, really poor, he'd probably be more willing to take a risk and sell Romeo the poison anyway, just because he is so desperate for the money. And his bet turns out to be right. The apothecary does not want to sell him the poison, but he is so desperate for money, he agrees and does sell Romeo poison that he can use to kill himself, mentioning specifically that it's a very, very fast-acting poison and that it will kill him almost instantly as soon as he drinks it. And after this exchange, it kind of prompts Romeo to refer to money as a poison and how money acts as a corrupting influence and can be used to entice people to do immoral things. Like, again, how he was able to use his money to get the apothecary to sell him poison, even though he did not want, the apothecary didn't want to do that. But that's the end of scene 1. Scene 2 is very short. We're introduced to the character of Friar John, who is another monk in the same order as Friar Lawrence. And we learn that Friar John was the messenger sent by Friar Lawrence to give the message to Romeo. But we learn that Friar John was not able to deliver that message to Romeo because the guy he was going to Mantua with had been working with the sick. And the authorities thought they might be infected with plague, and not wanting to risk potentially spreading plague, Friar John and this other guy were both quarantined for a day. So he was not able to go to Mantua. So this is why Romeo did not get Friar Lawrence's message, because, again, Friar John could not go to Mantua because he was quarantined. And the authorities were so fearful that they wouldn't even let him send the letter out with somebody else. They wouldn't let anything leave the house where they were quarantined. So, again, so that's why Romeo does not know. That's why he didn't get the message, because the message was not sent. And Friar Lawrence, when Friar John tells him this, freaks out. He tells him that that message was really, really important. And resolves that he now has to go to the Capulet tomb to let Juliet out, because she will be waking up in a couple hours. And since the message did not get to Mantua, Friar Lawrence assumes that Romeo has no idea that anything is going on with Juliet, so he would therefore have no reason to come back to Verona. So Friar Lawrence would have to go. Sorry. But Friar Lawrence would have to go to let Juliet out of the tomb. And he basically says that he'll have to go and let her out, and then send another message to Romeo to let him know that he has to come to Verona to get her, and that he can hide her out with him. Friar Lawrence can hide her with him for a couple of days until Romeo gets there. And he sets off to let Juliet out of the tomb, and that's the end of scene 2. Scene 3 is the longest scene in the play, but it's also the last scene in the play. It takes place in the graveyard at night, and it opens with Paris. Paris is visiting Juliet's grave, the Capulet tomb, and he is there to grieve for her in private. However, he does go and hide when he hears Romeo approaching. And when he sees Romeo trying to break into the tomb, he assumes that Romeo is there to do some further dishonor towards the Capulets by either defiling the bodies inside, namely the bodies of Juliet and Tybalt, or defacing and damaging the tomb. So Paris basically tries to make a citizen's arrest of Romeo and take him to the city watch. And Romeo, meanwhile, is kind of losing it a little mentally and is very, very much not in the mood for that. Romeo tells him that he has a very specific purpose for being there, and that he's there to do it, and that if Paris does not get out of his way and let him do what he came there to do, which, again, we know is to kill himself, but if Paris does not let him do what he came there to do, he won't hesitate to kill him. But he tells Paris that he doesn't want to fight him and that he should just leave. He really just wants him to leave. Paris does not listen, and he and Romeo wind up fighting, and Romeo kills Paris. Paris's page, meanwhile, runs off to fetch the city watch, while Romeo's servant Balthazar has been left on guard duty and has fallen asleep. But as Paris is dying, he asks Romeo to take him inside the tomb to lay him with Juliet. And Romeo does this after he gets the tomb open, kind of indicating that he has a lot of respect, or at least he has some degree of respect for Paris, which seems to go along with everything we've heard about Paris from every other character, that he's a pretty good guy. And it also kind of shows that Romeo did not want to kill Paris, and that it was upset with Paris, was upset that Paris got in his way, as he would view it. So after bringing Paris inside the Capulet tomb, he looks around. He specifically mentions that Juliet has color, like her cheeks and her lips have color to them. And he remarks that she doesn't look dead, but he doesn't really make anything of that. Just he kind of interprets that to mean she's so beautiful, even in death. Whereas, again, we, the audience, know that, no, the reason she doesn't look like she's dead is because she's not dead. But Romeo also notices Tybalt's body and comments how, by killing himself, the man who killed Tybalt, he is effectively avenging Tybalt. So after making these comments and observations, Romeo drinks the poison and dies. And it's shortly after that Friar Lawrence arrives on the scene and looks inside the tomb and sees that Romeo and Paris are both dead, and kind of has a moment where he's just starts freaking out and is like, oh, this was not supposed to go this way. This is not how this was supposed to happen. And it's at that moment that Juliet wakes up and is looking around for Romeo, is kind of confused, and Friar Lawrence tells her that Romeo is dead, Paris is dead, the Watch are coming, and that she's going to have to go and be a nun to hide and keep up the ruse that she's dead. Juliet resolves to not go with him and just to stay in the tomb. So Friar Lawrence, upon hearing the Watch arrive, runs away. Juliet decides to kill herself to be with Romeo. She notices that the bottle of poison that Romeo had, he drank it all, and the bottle is empty. So she kisses him, hoping that there is still poison on his lips. There is not. At which point she takes his dagger and stabs herself with it and kills herself. At that moment, the Watch arrive on the scene and find Paris, Romeo, and Juliet dead. And the Watch basically split up and send two groups out. One to go and search the area and round up anybody nearby to see if there are witnesses. And two, to go and tell the prince, the Montagues, and the Capulets that their relatives are dead. So these guys, the Watch go out and they come back pretty quick. They come back with Friar Lawrence and Balthazar, who were found nearby and have been brought in for questioning. And also the prince, the Capulets, and Lord Montague arrive on the scene. Lord Montague mentions that his wife had died earlier that day out of grief from Romeo's banishment. So Lady Montague has died off stage. But upon arriving on the scene and questioning Friar Lawrence and Balthazar, Friar Lawrence tells everybody the true story of what happened with Romeo and Juliet, that they fell in love, they secretly got married and could not be together openly because of their parents, and that because of Romeo's banishment and Juliet's impending marriage to Paris, the pair got desperate and wound up killing themselves. And Balthazar backs up this claim and also gives them a letter that Romeo had given him to deliver to his father, which from Romeo's own perspective backs up everything that Friar Lawrence had said. And after reading all this and taking all this information in, the prince places the majority of the blame on their parents, on the Montagues and the Capulets. saying that their feud ultimately is what led to the deaths of their children. How basically, as he kind of comments, how the universe was in a way punishing them for their hatred for because of their hatred for each other. The universe was punishing them by taking away the things that they loved, namely their children. However, he also mentions that he himself, he also believes that he bears some responsibility and was being punished by the universe or fate as well, because the prince blames himself for not doing anything about the feud and allowing it to continue and go on. And that if he had basically stepped up earlier to stop the feud, Romeo and Juliet probably wouldn't have died. So he bears some responsibility as well. And it's also kind of interesting to point out that all three of the parties the prince labels as guilty, they each suffered the same punishment. They each lost 2 members of the family. The Capulets lost Juliet and Tybalt. The Montagues lost Romeo and Lady Montague. And the prince lost his relatives, Paris and Mercutio. So again, it is rather interesting that they all have the same losses, which could potentially back up the prince's claim, thematically reinforce the prince's belief that the universe was punishing them for the Capulets and the Montagues for their hatred, and him for his tolerance for it. In response to this, Lord Capulet and Lord Montague resolved to end the feud, and they promised to build statues dedicated of the other's children. So the Capulets will build a statue of Romeo, and the Montagues will build a statue of Juliet. And that's the end of the play. So bittersweet ending, as again, Romeo and Juliet are dead, but the feud is over as well, and the 2 families have become friendly towards each other, bonded through their shared grief. So that's Romeo and Juliet. Again, classic Shakespearean tragedy. I hope you found it interesting and enjoyable. I definitely enjoyed reading it this time around. And we'll look a bit more in depth at some of the deeper elements of this play with your projects, which are due next week. And if you have any questions about that, let me know. Your quiz over Act 5 will go up tomorrow, and will open tomorrow. And again, if you have any questions over that, email me, let me know. With that being said, take care, and I will talk to you later.